was my last script. This is a normal script. This is today's script. I'm sorry, guys.
Question 1. Do you agree that women have a harder time on the internet than men?
I'm constantly going into essay writing mode when approaching these questions, demanding that someone define these terms for me. And seeing as I'm the only person in the room, I guess that someone better be me. Let me start by specifying that when referring to men or women throughout this video, I will generally be referring to self-defined gender. Sometimes, more specifically, apparent gender, occasionally biological sex. I'll try and make those different occasions clear. Secondly, and I'd actually like to argue more difficultly, a harder time? Pinning down what that means will be the crux of my answer. So I definitely believe women, cisgendered, self-defined and apparent, have a harder time on YouTube than men. Other sites I could put some comments towards, but I'm less familiar with them and would feel I would be speaking with much less authority. This is with regards to, firstly, obtaining an audience. I made a whole series of videos on that. And with regards to abuse, both in the levels that abuse can tend to and the widespread prevalence of that abuse. If we're defining a harder time as either of the above, I would say yes. Undoubtedly. There is, however, another manner in which a harder time can be defined and which I think is slightly more complex. I would redefine the question to, are women more restricted in their gender identities than men? Now, this is intrinsically tied up with popularity and abuse, as I've previously discussed, with regards to areas of female discourse and the parodying of gender, but I would say that men are as restricted, if not even more restricted, in correctly being their apparent gender, or the gender traditionally tied to their biological sex. Now, don't get me wrong, females are still challenged for stepping beyond the female spaces. I mean, look at the accusations made against fake cosplayers and the Hazer Girl Gamer campaign. But I would say the criticisms levelled at men who partake in feminine spheres, particularly visible in homophobia and transphobia, can be worse, and in fact are more prevalent in that specific community of men. This consideration, of course, relies on defining a harder time as having less access to flexible identities, which isn't ostensibly the definition, but I think should be a part of it. I think it's often considered a less important part of that definition because we have an unconscious alignment of the masculine with the better. We measure what is good and a better achievement by masculine language and ideals. Women are seen as being liberated in being allowed to ascend from the lesser spheres they were previously confined to. Men are ridiculed as lowering themselves for even wanting to partake in them. So yes, women have a harder time on YouTube than men. It is harder for them to obtain large audiences, they are more likely to receive abuse, and that abuse is more likely to be at a much harsher level. That is not to dismiss the ways that men can also have a hard time on YouTube and the wider internet beyond in being confined to rigid gender identities. And it is gender identities, both male and female, that I believe underpin these symptoms of fewer subscribers and increased harassment that women particularly suffer from. Why is this so? There are millions of whys. I mean, I tried to answer this question specifically with regards to just one of those definitions I've just delineated and ended up speaking for over half an hour and 4 videos. I guess to try and exhibit some explanation briefly, it is that there are. Despite people's protestations that feminism is done, that it's a solved issue, that we have gender equality, there are still differences in gender. Social differences we don't even necessarily even recognise, but they do still exist. They limit the way we feel able to act within the confines of our chosen gender. And they've moulded us intrinsically through social norms and expectations according to our apparent gender. They have necessarily made the life of a man and the life of a woman different, and this has resulted in women finding themselves in a more precarious position, especially when it comes to YouTube and the internet.
Is it helpful or harmful to acknowledge that?
It is currently helpful. Now, I do believe there is a stage where it would be harmful, but in my opinion, we are nowhere near it. And actually, even if we do get to that stage, I'm not sure we can stop acknowledging gender difference. I mean, it's coded into our very language. A friend of mine who identifies as agender, meaning they self-define as neither male nor female, told me they don't understand why more people don't just do as they have. They believe a lot of gender politics could be solved by such a stance. As much as I would like that to be the case, I unfortunately believe it's more complicated than that. Even if I, from this point forwards, stopped defining myself as female, I'll still be apparently female, and therefore still receive a specific treatment from society. Also, having been raised for 24 years as female, I do believe this has moulded the personality I've formed. That even if I did actively try to stop acting in ways that might have been caused by the gender I was raised as, I would still have deep-seated influences that I'd just be unable to untangle from it. Being female is a communal identity. It's something I choose to enter into because I believe these people share something with me, that these people are like me. But it's also something that's been worked upon me in so many of the formative experiences of my life. Recognising differences between genders is necessary because it allows us, bit by bit, to demonstrate the social construct gender is. It will hopefully allow the crowbarring apart of that unfortunate coupling that is gender and biological sex. And then beyond that, to break down gender itself more and more into a complete spectrum. We need to get to a stage where people pick up whatever bits and pieces of identity they're comfortable with, regardless of their biology. The reason I feel we can't just all identify as agender now is because those differences are ingrained in our language, in our upbringings, in our continued interactions. To ignore them now wouldn't be to make them go away, but to allow them to continue separating us, just unnoticed or under new labels. Finally, question 2. I promise my answers will be shorter from here on.
Question 2. What is the most helpful book or article you've read, or film you've watched, or video you've seen this year about womanhood?
Is there anyone out there who's yet to see Anita Sarkeesian's TEDx talk with regards to the massive online hate campaign she received when trying to fund a series of videos talking about female tropes in video games? Seriously, go watch it. And in fact, her channel in general, Feminist Frequency, which talks about gender with relation to social media and culture. I originally came across her because she made some videos on Lego.
Question 3. Do you think a focus on supported networks of women is beneficial or harmful to the cause?
I think it can definitely be beneficial. I mean, it was one of the reasons I was arguing that makeup gurus and booktubers were perhaps able to flourish more so than women in other genres of video making on YouTube. It's females in female spaces. The question to ask, though, is, are networks like Wonderly or demarcations of excellence such as the Orange Book Awards that only allow female content creators not just patronising? Women's only things, aren't they in a way just saying women can't compete against men? I would say no. I feel this is ultimately a very similar question to one we had earlier. Is it helpful or harmful to acknowledge difference? I feel this is a way of acknowledging the differences that are still inherent between traditional gender roles. It proclaims them as real, and as such demands different language, different dealings, different measurements to consider these different things by. How can a woman, when still being moulded by the unconscious limitations of a society that still considers her a woman, win when she's being measured by male standards? It may be a sticking plaster, if you will, treating the symptoms and not the disease, but when we acknowledge that the underlying problem is society's binary delineation of gender and then that alignment of gender with the biological sex you happen to be born with, well, we have to admit we don't really have a perfect solution figured out yet. We simply do the best we can. And the best we can sometimes involves positive discrimination.
Question 4. What have you done personally to support women creators online this year?
Well, I've never gone out of my way to support something, that is, in buying a particular product or patronising some particular produce just because of the creator's gender. If I'm going to do this, then I should arguably be going out of my way to read YA written by men, as they are the underrepresented gender in that genre. But I did make these videos, as much as that sounds like I'm just producing my personal bugle and harping on it unceremoniously. But I am really proud of these pieces. I did put a lot of work into them. And I do feel that if more people understand the typecasts associated with gender on YouTube, then they might be more steadily overcome. People might gain wider audiences, despite the hurdles that are obviously there.
Do you think that things are better right now than they were this time a year ago?
I agree with Rosianna and think that at least momentarily things are pretty stagnant. With regards to gender, I'm way too overly sensitive. Oh no, here she is again, harping on about a solved issue, making a dragon-guarded Erebor out of a hobbit hole. I think a lot of people are really still stuck on very early forms of feminism. They feel that because women are no longer physically limited by law, that they can theoretically get a job in the most male-dominated of industries, that everything's the same for everyone now. I feel attention needs to be paid to the steps before. to the expectations that are raised in someone, to the ways they're directed to consider themselves as a sexual being, to the intricacies of how they're treated. These are often, sadly, being neglected.
What do you pledge to do this coming year to support women creators?
Like I said, I'm not going to go out of my way to subscribe to someone just because of their gender, but that makes it sound like there are no good women out there to subscribe to. There are tons of fantastic female content creators on YouTube. Of my subscriptions, 132, so about a third are female-fronted channels. One thing I would like to do though is create another series on gender and sexism. I was so astounded by the reaction to my last series. I mean, I was so scared to put that up, and yet everyone reacted so enthusiastically, and it sparked some amazingly intelligent responses. There are quite a few topics I'd love to consider in a similar manner. Comedy sitcoms, university and lad culture, the upvoting of Reddit. I'm still kind of nervous that I'd do them badly or they'd just incur truckloads of wrath. So we'll see. Finally, question 5.
Who are your 5 favourite female internet people?
Hannah Hart. The way she speaks makes my face happy. I just want to get drunk and eat cheese with her. Victoria from ThatBookGirl, one of the most intelligent and overlooked vloggers on the internet. Awkward Adolescents. Chloe, a YouTuber I've just discovered, but she's so funny and I feel like she's got the makings of a young community channel there. Meg Birch. As well as making beautiful videos about Oxford that make me gawp, her YouTube experience, having become the target of sexual objectification after making a video on tonsophobia, having addressed that and challenged that, I think it makes her a vlogger to really look up to. Finally, Elmify. I will list her again and again as my favourite YouTuber. Her videos are unique among media for actually being able to represent the mechanics of my thought process. I tag some of my favourite male YouTubers, partially so they don't feel excluded from this survey because of their gender, partially so I can also recommend some of my favourite YouTubers who don't happen to identify as female. Nathan Talbott, whose deadpan delivery and superb acting abilities always have me giggling away in serious situations when I'm meant to be serious. Ovinicus, who I really want to start a collab channel with one day. And Jacob Trueman, half of the Frattercats channel, but here specifically with regards to his Latum Way channel. I think we have vaguely similar opinions, just framed in different discourses. Anyway, that'll do, Stevie. That'll do. See you in my next video. Bye, guys.